So today on the podcast, I have Chris. You got to tell me how to say it last name again.
No, do it. Go for it.
Swartzel?
Oh my goodness, that's way off, Marty. No, it's Schwagerl. It's Schwagerl. We
Swaggle.
practiced this. Yeah. The R is silent. Schwagerl.
I knew I was
Sorry, I put
brought
you on
in.
the spot on your own podcast, man.
It's all good. It's all good. So about killing complacency, helping people live more intentional lives. Chris, you're in St. Paul, Minnesota, and you help people kind of work through their stuff, but specifically syndications with real estate investors, right?
Exactly right. Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that? What that looks like?
Yeah. Well, real estate investing itself, and then when you cross that line and get into syndication, where you're taking somebody else's hard-earned cash, so their investment, their time, their sacrifice, and putting it into a deal, there can be a lot of pressure there, a lot of stakes, And so there's a lot of stress. And what we know about mental health in our brain is things are kind of barely hanging on. And then you add stress into that soup recipe and you got yourself like a 5-alarm chili, like things are kind of going off. And so what I do is I help people learn their psychology. I help them leverage their psychology and embrace their psychology so that they can essentially get out of their own way and start raising more capital and closing more deals. So a lot of people have a self-image that is rooted in middle school. It's a psychology term here, post-operational thought. Happens around age 10, 11, 12, maybe, which is like a really awkward time in our lives. And so a lot of times, go ahead, please.
Would you say it's lies we believe about ourselves?
I wouldn't say that they're lies. No.
Okay.
I would say that they are asynchronous, let's say. So these were things that were true or we worried about back then, but we have 30,000 thoughts a day, and 96% of those thoughts are recycled from the day before. So if we think we're nerdy, we're unworthy, we can't talk to the pretty girl, we're a Dungeons and Dragons kid, we're a tech kid, we have ADHD and school doesn't work well for us anyway, we're a C student, no one likes us here, we don't fit in, or we feel like if we make a mistake, we'll be kicked out or picked on. That churns itself over and over and over again in our thoughts for decades. And then you go out and you say, okay, I need to raise $2 million. But that image is still in the back of your mind. So I've developed what I call the STARS method, which is a culmination of 11 different psychological theories. And what we do is we find those limiting beliefs and those fears, and we let you pick and choose which ones you want to lean into and which ones you want to say, we'll leave that in the past. And so what we really do is we kind of separate the priorities from the noise, because there's a lot of noise and a lot of distractions out there. Procrastination, analysis paralysis, shiny objects, all that kind of stuff is really just a manifestation of our own fears.
Sure. Chris, have you you mentioned analysis paralysis, and that made me think of the different personality characters. Character traits. Does that play into this at all? We're having to work people through, the cautious person has analysis paralysis. Do you ever have to work through those things?
Yeah, well, I think, yes, we do. We do somewhat, not like targeted like that.
Okay.
But generally, that's a really good idea, Marty, to have different personality traits with that. You got me thinking. Anyways.
Benjamin Hardy, have you heard of him?
Of course.
He has a book called Personality Isn't Permanent.
Sure.
But I read it after reading a book called Surrounded by Idiots, which is it's about how everyone's around you is an idiot because they don't think like you. And that book is very much like, it was really good because it made me understand my family. But then Benjamin Hardy's book, Personality Isn't Permanent, just slams that book in its face, saying we're not limited by who we are, our personality.
Yeah. And that's what I was going to mention, is that personality types, not necessarily we go into that, but step one of like the STARS method that we do, and this is what we do with clients. It takes about 90 days. We do this over 6 sessions. We've got really good success with this so far. But the first lesson is all about your clay. You are moldable clay, and you've just chosen to stay put. And a lot of times when we grow, it feels uncomfortable because our subconscious wants us to be this identity. There's this concept of cognitive dissonance, which says, I believe one thing, but then I run into another thing on the outside. And those things are dissonant. And so what wins? Our subconscious wins all the time. So for instance, if I say I'm unworthy of raising $5 million for an apartment building, and I go to a rah conference and learn everything I need to know and beyond about raising $5 million for an apartment building, and then I go back to the real world, my subconscious takes over and says, no, like, who are you kidding? We're not that guy. And so we have different ways to kind of mold that and different ways to work with your subconscious to kind of like massage that, comfort zone to make it bigger and bigger. We can use mental imagery. We can use affirmations. We can reach out to other people in our sphere and ask them about us. But really, it's a lot of mental work and mental practice to get reps in to start getting new songs in the playlist in our head.
Would you say it's easy to stay in what we know? I mean, it's harder to grow, right? It's harder
absolutely.
To lean in. It's easy to stay in the complacency of today and just do what we've always known, right?
For sure. And that's why kill complacency is active. It's not like a passive thing that you just sit back and you have it done. You're actively working on it. Our brains are not meant to make our lives good. They're not. In fact, they will actively sabotage you growing into something better. Really? Our brains are meant to make our lives easy. And so killing complacency is literally a verb. It's an action. It's something you have to do. It's not something that just happens. You have to work on it.
That's good. That I've kind of taken up running, and it's a verb too, You can't just run a marathon. You've got to put your reps in. And it's hard. And you got to put your time in. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And
Exactly. I feel terrible for my neighbor, Sean. He trained for the Twin Cities Marathon last year.
Oh, and
he's got twins that are 1 and a 3-year-old. So like going out running 20 miles is a huge ask of his family, of his wife. He was training for 3 months, and then the morning of the marathon, they said it's too warm. We're going to cancel.
Too hot. I saw that.
Yeah. So I said, "What are you going to do?" And he's like, "I don't know. When I'm done with this 6-pack of beer, I'll let you know." And I was like, "Okay."
Well, that's hard. But going back to you guys teach people basically to lean into the hard, to do what isn't necessarily the easy that their brain tells them to do every day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you guys help train them to have bigger, better thoughts.
Yeah, just different. I mean, you can put the label of bigger or better on it however you choose. I mean, it's your life. And this is why this stuff is so custom, and why I can't feed this to you in a PDF file, why I can't. A guy asked me last week, is this something my VA can do? It's like, sure. If you want your VA to be awesome, absolutely. But this is something that's active. This is something that you have to do, because I can't give you a list of here's 10 affirmations and you'll grow, because your subconscious will know, dude, this isn't us, And so there's really kind of 3 filters that our subconscious has when we're determining if something is going to get like instantly filtered out. And is it in our own voice? Like your inner voice has a tone, a vocabulary.
Sure.
I joke that mine's kind of like a frat guy, and like it really kind of is. So it needs to be in that language. 2, it needs to be positively stated. Like, I have healthy lungs, not I'm a non-smoker, or I'm going to quit smoking. Do you get that? Like it has to be positively stated, not negative, because then our subconscious is like, smoking, cool, let's smoke. It doesn't get that yes, no. And then last, it has to be in present tense. Because if you say something like, I'm on my way to raising $1 million, your subconscious is like, cool, man. Sounds good. But if you're saying, I raise $1 million, or I'm a capital raiser, I'm a self-storage operator, then your subconscious is like, I don't know, man. But then you get enough reps in. Our brains are like a top 40 radio station. We're like, there's only so many songs that play. So if you can start to get some more intentional songs in there that you want to hear, it's just going to go into heavy rotation. And so then what happens in your subconscious is like, well, I don't know. Let me go to the conscious, our eyes, ears, to see what's around me. And then your eyes and ears see you listening to podcasts, putting out LOIs, talking to investors, attending conferences. You're buying a suit, things like that. And it's like, maybe we are a self-storage operator, and so those are one of those ways that you can kind of massage that comfort zone.
Did you say earlier 36,000 thoughts a day, 90% are yesterday's thoughts? Something like that?
Yeah, who knows? I mean, I said 30,000 thoughts and 96% of them are recurring, but you could be right too. I think it really kind of depends on which study you're looking at.
No, I was trying to quote you. So whatever you say, 30,000, 30K a day, 36. So we only have the 4% is what we need to retrain.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, actually, I shouldn't say that. No, the 4% is like the new stuff that happens to us, which is very little. What you want to do is you want to get in there and you want to know that there's like 96%. Well, if 30,000 would be 28,800 recurring thoughts. So if you can put a wedge in there and start to get a couple of intentional thoughts or some contrarian thoughts or some growth thoughts, that's going to be really powerful because that's going to spin and spin and spin. Because the next day it's going to be the same. Next day it's going to be the same. And you keep hammering at it. And I'm not talking about a lot, but if you can do this a minute at a time for 5 times a day, or here's something that my client taught me, which is so great. I don't know why I didn't think about, because we can't think of everything. But what he does is he puts his affirmations on the mirror of his bathrooms. So then whenever he's washing his hands, he does his affirmations. And he told me he went to his first conference and he wasn't going to put Post-its on the Marriott's mirrors. Yeah. But he's so trained now that he washes his hands and he just says to himself, hey, what was it? I'm valid and I'm knowledgeable. He just says, I'm valid, I'm knowledgeable. And he just heads back to his conference.
That's so cool.
And that sounds like voodoo hippie stuff. But that dude came home with a $6.5 million check. So that's pretty cool.
Brian Tracy talks a lot about validations and saying them in the positive. That was when I was first probably introduced to it, was hearing it from him. And I think his book called Goals.
Brian Tracy's awesome, man.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
He would be right in line with you, right? With mindset.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. And he and I see a lot of things alike. I'm trained in psychology, so I can kind of add that. I've been working in the psychological field for the past 19 years.
Yeah. How long have you been niched down to real estate syndicators?
Just in the past year. Okay. I've been a real estate investor myself for the past 11 years.
Okay.
And, people are like, how does a guy who's working in mental health making $17 an hour, make a portfolio?
Yeah.
And the answer is I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I got pissed off at living in my friend's basement forever, and I wanted something different. And so I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, bought a duplex, bought another duplex, bought another duplex. And now we just build houses in Florida because I don't want to be buying them. That's like, everyone's got their thing about if they want houses close to them or property far away. I'm a far away guy.
Yeah.
And so I started getting into syndication and learning about that. What I found is I don't love doing deals. I don't love the analysis. I don't love the due diligence. What I love is the teamwork. I love the team building. I love the leadership aspect of it. I love raising capital. I love sales. And so I showed up at my first apartment building to do due diligence with my partners. Yeah. And one dude has 13 pages on a clipboard. The other guy has 7 pages on a clipboard, and I have 3 coffees. And I'm like, let's get to it, guys. And so what I realized was my piece of the puzzle in syndication, because it's a big piece of the puzzle, right? You figure out what you're good at and you lean into it. What I'm good at is getting people to believe that they can do it. So these guys went out and we dissolved our partnership, and I went on my own, and those guys ended up buying the apartment building. They didn't want to. And I was talking them through it about why not? Why not? Oh, this seems psychological. It checks all the boxes, but you're still going to say no? Like, what's really in there? And so we did some work together and found out that one guy was afraid of raising capital from friends and family because he doesn't want to upset them.
Might fail.
Okay, well then don't. Then don't. Do all the work and invite them to be a part of it. If they want to be a part of it, great. If they don't, cool. But you're going to work your tail off to make sure that it works.
Yeah.
And so one of them said, I would have paid big money for this. And I was like, really?
Yeah.
So then I just kind of started, I realized that I was getting a lot of calls and a lot of people reaching out just for pep talks here and there. I don't want to get on LinkedIn. I don't want to go on podcasts. I don't want to do this. I know that I got to start a meetup, but I don't want to, all those kinds of things, and just kind of grew the business from there. And so it's really exploded.
That's cool. Is it, Chris, I would imagine it's similar, whatever niche it is with psychology, right? You're still going to help somebody overcome whatever hurdles they are.
Yeah.
You're still going to start with clay and make them into something, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Same thing. We have the same psychological studies, all that kind of stuff. And most of those are on freshman college kids who need credits. So we know a whole lot about freshman college kids, and the funny thing about psychology versus other sciences, if something happens 99% of the times in physics, we're like, what's up with that other 1%? But if something happens 70% of the time in psychology, we're like, that's a theory. That works. Because we're all so different.
Yeah.
We're all wired so differently. We have such wildly different families, family backgrounds, ancestry, goals. Like we eat different foods and exercise differently. We're all so different. And so it's why it's such a customized field.
Earlier you mentioned Rich Dad, Poor Dad. Do you feel like that's a mindset? I sometimes feel like that's more of a mindset book than a real estate book. People call it a real estate book, but
yeah,
do you really think it's about adjusting your mindset and how you view money?
Oh, absolutely. For me, absolutely. And I've been in the room. I haven't met Robert Kiyosaki before, but I've been in the room where he's talked, and I know he talks about it's just an accounting book, but I don't think so, because at the time I read that, I was 31 years old, Marty. 31. So like way too old to be living in a friend's basement. Yeah. It was a den too, like no windows, like illegal. So I was way too old to be living there. And I read that book, and definitely my mindset shifted. And I still push away the doubts of my relationship with money. My family of origin doesn't have a lot of money, and I come from farming backgrounds. So a big core value of mine growing up was you get what you get and you don't throw a fit, right? And that's fantastic. It's a fantastic way to practice gratitude. That's an awful money mindset, because I thought that, hey, I always wanted to help the world. I wanted to help kids who didn't have parents, which was my thing since high school that I always wanted to do, why I got into psychology. And so I would work with kids who were abused by moms and dads or aunts and uncles or whatever. I was working at a domestic abuse project, just thinking I'm always going to make $17 an hour. It's just the lot I picked. But like a true Minnesotan, I was passive aggressive as hell about it. I was like, oh, it must be nice to go to Costa Rica because you're a banker and don't help out the world. Meanwhile, I'm helping out society and I don't get anything. I guess I'm going to have to go to work at the bar this weekend, which I did, And so finally, one of my friends' wives, said, why don't you do something about this?
Mm.
And I never thought, I honestly, it had never occurred to me. I didn't know, I don't have
That
entrepreneurship in my family. And so I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and it was like, holy smokes, holy cow. And one thing I've always been able to do is like self-discipline.
okay.
So I just ate peanut butter and jelly sandwiches for like 3 months, and
Started saving.
yeah, picked up extra shifts. I think I put 3% down on my first, property back in 2013. Those
Yeah,
prices, we would kill for those prices
that
now.
would be
It's like
nice, huh?
150 grand for a duplex, and it was fantastic.
That's cool. The other thing I was thinking about there is the book The Psychology of Money. Have you read that one?
Mm. I was showing somebody that my version of that the other day on a Zoom, and they were like, "How many tabs do you have on there?" And I think I've highlighted 40% of that book, which is like, why even highlight anything at all? Like,
I
I
just
love
went
that book.
I just read it about 2 weeks ago, but I really feel like that'd
Oh,
be a really good pre-marriage book. Like in
oh, fantastic.
helping couples understand when you come into marriage, you're going to view this differently. And you need to
Hmm.
work through that because that's a lot of the issues we have, right?
Oh, absolutely. We all have different relationships with money. And like Nate Bargatze, the comedian, he always talks about how every couple, there's the spender and there's a saver. He's like, thank goodness for my wife. Otherwise, we'd be homeless right now.
Yeah.
And that's so true. In my family, I'm the spender and my wife is the saver, you
Okay.
know, and I love like we're building houses,
Yeah.
in Cape Coral, a booming market. We have other properties in Ocala, Florida, booming
Yeah.
market, and we've got passive income coming in. And every time we get like a repair bill, they had to pressure wash something like that.
Yeah.
And it was like $600. And my wife's like, ooh, is it worth it to have these properties? And it's like that tension is needed, you
Yeah.
know, otherwise I would have bankrupted us, and she would be working 50 hours a week contributing to a 401k forever,
Yeah. And just you guys would have been happy right there because you hadn't leaned into it, right? I mean, you wouldn't have known any better.
Happy.
Okay,
Yeah,
not happy.
maybe. I think like agreeable, perhaps
Yeah.
agreeable. Yeah. Do you have that too, Marty? Do you have those people in your life that you like have to figure out money with?
Well, I think it's constant. And I'm into real estate too. We do a lot of single family houses, a little bit of commercial, but almost every conversation when you go to buy someone's house is the psychology of money, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's figuring that out, what their view is. Sorry, what
Oh,
their
good.
view is regarding money, because maybe they're selling a house for one reason, or maybe it's another, but maybe it's not the money at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So,
and most of the time it isn't. I mean, money's just a tool, right? It's
hmm
just a tool that amplifies our feelings, and so we come into like sunken cost fallacy. We've lived in this house so long we can't sell it.
yeah,
Or you come into how we uh, I forget what it is. I think it's 9 times. Our brains are 9 times more fixated on things that we lose versus things we gain.
yeah,
you know so we hate losing money. I can give you $1,000,000 and you're like, cool, let's go to Disney, and then a week later you're fine. But if I'm like, I'm going to steal $1,000,000 from you, you'll never ever let go of that. you
yeah,
know it's so funny how we have these like heuristics, they call it in psychology, but these like mental shortcuts, again, to make our brains try to make our jobs as people easier. So
hmm
losing stuff somewhere along the line of humanity must have been really, really bad. It must have been way worse than getting something. Where nowadays we don't have those threats other than, buying something or investing, things like that.